Welcome to an episode of InRange. This is going to be one of our most controversial videos of all time. It's part of our Practical Shooting 101 series where we're trying to give kind of the basics.
Yeah. We talked about red dots.
Yep.
We talked about low power variable optics.
Yep, I just did one a little while ago about red dots on shotguns.
Yeah. And
we did handguns too. DA, SA, striker fired, all that.
right. But one of the things that kept coming up on the optic videos was talk about prisms.
Prisms. We talked about red dots, and I kind of put out there the narrative, and I've done this for years, that my preferred configuration is a red dot with a magnifier. But turns out there's problems with that for some people.
Yeah. Some people have vision limitations.
Yeah, you done got one of them.
A little bit. Not nearly to the degree that some people do that like can't use a red dot at all, but I have a slight astigmatism. It's partially corrected with my corrective lenses, which you all enjoy watching me on video with. And I do get a little bit like a tail coming off of a red dot.
A little bit of...
Yeah. Or sometimes like if it's a poor quality one, it'll look like a slash instead of an actual concentric dot.
So for some people, like for some, you'll like it looks like a comet. Other people get like a whole splash.
Or
like
a starburst kind of thing. So for those people, prisms are actually a good choice. And prisms are usually an etched reticle on glass, and the etched reticle is adjustable like a traditional scope.
So one of the things that I think was really confusing to people, because they kept bringing up prisms, was one of the things I emphasized about red dots, and the reason I kept pushing red dots is a red dot without a magnifier has zero eye relief whatsoever. Meaning you have either a red dot or a holographic sight. There's a pane of glass and there's a dot on it, and that dot's either projected or illuminated. But because there's no manipulation of the vision of the light going through the optic, it's just looking through a pane of glass, means that your eye can be anywhere behind it at any time. There's not an eye box or eye relief. Anywhere you can see the dot, you can shoot.
Which is particularly important from unconventional shooting positions, shooting around obstacles, shooting around cover, using props at matches like we do. So not having eye relief is generally faster to acquire, get behind, send the shot.
Which is why I say that if you don't have an astigmatism problem, I still will continue to argue, probably till I am dead and buried or whatever is done to me, that a red dot is still the fastest, most optimal sighting system for high stress, high speed shooting.
Yes, it's the default option, and then moving away from it is because of particular considerations.
Right. And now here we're talking about considerations. So if you can use a red dot, in my opinion, do. That said, if you can't, or there are reasons you want to do something different, the next best thing is going to be some form of low magnification, fixed magnification, or no magnification. I call that 1x prism, because they're going to provide the most generous eye relief and eye box for an optic that does manipulate the light with lenses.
Right. Yeah, so a lot of the 1x fixed prisms, for example, have eye reliefs in the range of like 4 to 6 inches, meaning it can be almost anywhere on your flat top, and you'll still be able to see through
Right,
it.
you could put it way forward or way back. It really doesn't make a difference. The difference here is that a prism is a scope, meaning there is a primary lens, at least a primary and a secondary lens, with something etched, as you said, as a reticle in the middle. A red dot or holographic sight does not have lenses, it just has a piece of glass. That's the difference. These are scopes.
Yes.
Now, there's a lot of different types of prisms, and the one prismatic sights, and the one most people are going to be most familiar with, at least in terms of name, may not even think of it as being a prism or a prismatic, but that's an ACOG.
Yep.
Like the old 4X ACOG that's been around since, feels like the beginning of time now.
Since, I think, 1990.
Right, but that is a prismatic sight, right? So what is a prismatic sight different, and how does it differ from a low power variable optic?
Less moving parts.
Yep.
Generally more robust mounting systems.
Okay.
In particular, like, because the ACOGs were originally designed to go in the carry handle of an M16.
That's how old the ACOG is.
There's just a screw that comes up from the bottom and holds it in place. You don't have to level it. You just bolt it to the mount or just bolt it to your carry handle, and it's centered.
So generally speaking, prisms have, as you said, less or no moving parts.
Mm-hmm.
ACOGs have no moving parts besides zeroing.
Right.
And therefore, they are pretty damn durable.
Yep. And in fact, we could talk about our old Tiger Valley match experience. My ACOG got ran over.
Literally ran over by a truck.
And I sent it back to Trigicon, and they found nothing wrong with it.
It was fine. It was serviceable.
Yeah. And your variable
broke
in half.
Literally split in two.
Yep.
And so that's still the case, because when you have a variable that has primary lens, multiple lenses internally, to be able to do that magnification where you can go from 1 to 9 or whatever, there's moving parts and there's moving lenses doing that. And when those lenses move, first of all, there's stability issues in terms of rigidity, but also that does change your eye relief and eye box as they move,
mm-hmm.
which means a low power, an LPVO, low power variable optic at 1x might have pretty generous eye relief, but when you dial that into 10, it gets smaller.
Yeah, you got to be right there to see through it.
It's the nature of physics and manipulating light and vision through lenses. But prismatics don't do that. So, for example, this one here is what, a 1x, right?
Yeah, that is a Zerotech 1x. That's all it does. It has an illuminated reticle that isn't quite daylight bright for Arizona, but if you put it over a black target with the illumination on, you'll see a hint of red.
Mm-hmm.
It also has an adjustable diopter, which is one of the reasons I got that one, is I can actually focus that to work without my corrective lenses on.
Now, that does mean there's moving parts.
Yes, there is the moving part of the adjustable diopter.
So this is an ACOG, a mini ACOG. I happen to really love the 1.5x mini ACOG.
Mm-hmm.
This one's a 3, I think you said?
Yes.
But the ACOG does not have a diopter, so it does not have any adjustability whatsoever for how it's manipulating the light through the lenses.
Mm-hmm.
And that means for you, the ACOG actually isn't as clear a picture as that one below it, correct?
Correct. So if there's an adjustable diopter, I can focus it to work optimally with my corrective lenses.
Mm-hmm.
And if your prescription is in the range of the diopter, you can adjust it to work without your corrective lenses, which to me, that's an interesting thing to do for a home defense gun.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have time to grab your glasses and throw them on,
mm-hmm.
having at least the optic you're looking through be clear is something that's beneficial.
So that being said, I'm not a person that has an astigmatism, so this isn't something I've had to struggle with. This means actually that if you're trying to get away from that problem by not using a red dot and going to a prismatic, an ACOG may not work for you.
Yeah, it may not, particularly for me with the red fiber optic illumination. When it's full daylight bright,
really flaring out,
I do get a little bit of a comet tail off of the center dot in that reticle. If I dim it so that it's not overly illuminated, it gets back to a more concentric circle.
Which in old school days people would put tape over them, but you can get like things that slide. Or this one, for example, I've got this REM ACOG on it, which actually blocks about half of the fiber optic, and then I can use an LED to light it.
Right.
But that said, since it isn't adjustable in terms of focus, I'm going to use that word, it is interesting to note that it was someone with a worse astigmatism than yours may find an ACOG, ironically being the more expensive prismatics on the market, may not be right for them.
Correct.
You probably want to look for one with an adjustable diopter.
Or at the very least, like, look through one at a store
Yep.
or look through a friend's before you commit to purchasing one.
We're not going to do a destruction test here, but it does mean, however, that the ACOG is probably more durable.
It is the most, like, bomb-proof optic you can imagine.
I mean, I've heard of them breaking, but it's rare.
You got to work for it.
Yeah, that's a project, right?
Right.
So let's keep going on this. So we've got this, which is the 1X. This is a 3X, although you can do it in 1.5. This one's the old school 4X ACOG. This is the besides being mounted onto a pick rail, this is the granddaddy of all of them.
Well, a little bit updated. The TO1 NSN from 1990 did not have fiber optic.
Oh,
so
it didn't?
it was tritium only.
Man, that must have been way early. So because they went to this pretty soon.
Yeah, by the early 2000s, the fiber optic was pretty much the standard, and we see that the fiber optic models were adopted by the Marine Corps for general issue.
Okay. And then we move on, and now what I've got on this gun is I've got a primary arms 1X prismatic. But I'm doing something here that you really have heartache with, which is I've got a magnifier behind it. We hear about this. You don't like this.
So for me, if I know that I want variable magnification with a prism, I'm just going to go to an LPVO to start. because the generally the quality of the sight picture is better. You will generally have better visual clarity, and you're adding complexity to the system versus just having a single optic. Now, if you have a prism already and then you decide you need magnification, you don't want to sell it and upgrade, yeah, I kind of understand what people are going for here, but I also prefer, you might notice on my rifle here, I have the prism all the way at the rear. I just like the way the sight picture is with the prism all the way at the back.
Okay.
So I don't get any scope shadowing.
Sure.
It's more forgiving in that regard. So if you're going to this system, I would say consider going to an equivalently priced LPVO with a decent mount, versus introducing more complexity. And the other thing I'll say is your 0 is more likely to stay consistent, even adjusting magnification up and down in LPVO versus unmagnified versus magnified as separate systems. Because one of the things with these magnifiers they do have is they do twist a little bit, and sometimes you can come out of alignment. That's why you have adjustment to center the reticle in there.
Right.
But for the sake of consistency, and I'm probably more concerned about a higher level of accuracy than a lot of people would be.
Fair.
I would prefer an LPVO versus this system. Now, the one benefit you have going here is I would say this system is probably more robust overall than an LPVO in traditional scope rings.
Yeah, because, I mean, frankly, you still have the rigidity and durability of the prism, and if your magnifier were to get broke, you could just take it off.
And these are also using an ACOG style mounting system,
which are quite strong.
Yes.
So I just wanted to talk about this because I knew it was going to come up, but this is not wrong. It is just not what you prefer.
No, it's not what I prefer. I'm not going to tell people they're wrong for doing it, but if you're buying new from the start, consider looking at LPVO versus consider looking at that.
But I did want to throw this into the fray because it does work.
I think and the other thing we didn't cover was weight. So the 1X prisms by themselves are generally a lighter weight option than going to an LPVO if you're not going to use it at magnified settings very often.
Right, when you start throwing a magnifier on, you're of course adding weight.
Right.
Additionally, I didn't do the math here. I didn't look it up before we did the video, but I bet you some of these small prismatic sights like this one, I bet you that's lighter than even a Neotech.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely more svelte and smaller on the gun, right? So this is a very small little thing that you throw on there, and it really doesn't get in the way. Another thing you could think about with a prism.
Right.
Also, they tend to be, obviously prices vary, and ACOGs are expensive, but some of these aren't very expensive.
Yep. You also don't have to worry about batteries dying.
That's true. Yeah, the etched reticle will always be there.
Yep.
If your battery dies on your prismatic sight, the worst thing you have is you don't have an illuminated reticle, but you still have a reticle.
Correct.
Yeah, and of course with an ACOG, you got tritium and fiber optics. So,
and that's the reason why you'll see on, I normally have backup iron sights on my guns to placate the machine spirit, but on guns with prisms, I don't.
You don't worry about it.
I don't worry about it because if there's no battery to die, there's nothing that's going to go wrong with the optic that also wouldn't kill the gun.
Because the prism is durable enough that you're probably not worried about breaking it.
Yep.
And you're not worried about the battery dying and not having a reticle.
Correct.
Which can happen with red dots or holographics in particular.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so just to sum this up, prisms are the next best thing to a red dot, but they do not provide a 0 eye relief requirement. They do have an eye relief requirement. They are more rigid than an LPVO. So if you are not concerned with magnification at all, or you want fixed magnification like with an ACOG, you are getting probably the most durable, reliable, strong optic you could mount.
I would agree.
If you're worried about magnification, per your perspective, you should consider just going to an LPVO. However, you can do this if you needed to. Additionally, if you have a astigmatism, you probably want to either make sure you look through an ACOG before you purchase it, or any other fixed magnification prismatic that does not have adjustable diopter before you purchase it, or get one with adjustment so that you know you can set it for your eyeballs. I think that sums it up.
Yep.
Yeah?
Yeah, I don't think we have much else to say about that.
Well, there you go. You asked about prisms, and here we go. Prismatic sights galore. Hopefully this really clarified any questions you had about Prism sights versus red dots versus LPVOs, and that's the point of this 101 series. And the reason we can do this 101 series is because we're not worried about YouTube revenue. Because this is the kind of, I'm going to go ahead and say it, intelligent stuff that isn't promoted by the algorithm. Discussions about actually how this stuff works or why you should use it isn't the cool, flashy stuff that's going to show up on the homepage. It's stuff that people care about watch, but it isn't spicy and cool. It's actually educational.
Yep.
So if you like that stuff, consider supporting the channel. Patreon.com/InRangeTV. The reason it's people like you that make this channel possible to do content like this that would never make ad revenue even if we were monetized, but we're not. So once again, Patreon.com/InRangeTV. If you are a supporter, thank you. You can consider it. Every dollar counts. A couple more people adding $3 a month makes a big difference. If you can't do any of that, subscribe, click the bell. You probably won't get a notification, but share this with your friends. Share this with people you know that are getting into guns and want to learn stuff. And there's a whole playlist now being built on the channel of this 101 series, and there'll be more to come. So, thanks for watching.